Welcome to Wisdom Trek with Gramps. I am Guthrie Chamberlain, and we are on day 2578 of our trek. The purpose of Wisdom Trek is to create a legacy of wisdom, to seek out discernment and insights, and to boldly grow where few have chosen to grow before. In today's Wisdom Nugget, we begin our exploration of Psalm chapter 50, focusing on verses 1 through 6. This psalm, written by Asaph, presents a dramatic scene in which God himself appears as the divine judge, summoning the heavens and the earth to witness his judgment over his people. In the ancient Israelite perspective, this psalm would have carried a deep significance. It's an imagery of God speaking from Zion, fire and storm surrounding him, and his call for justice would have reminded them of God's covenant at Mount Sinai. The Israelites were well aware that God was not just their deliverer, but also their judge, calling them to righteousness and true worship. Let's begin by reading Psalm chapter 50, verses 1 through 6 from the New Living Translation. The Lord, the Mighty One, is God, and he has spoken. He has summoned all humanity from where the sun rises to where it sets. From Mount Zion, the perfection of beauty, God shines in his glorious radiance. Our God approaches, and he is not silent. Fire devours everything in his way, and a great storm rages around him. He calls on the heavens above and the earth below to witness the judgment of his people. Bring my faithful people to me, those who made a covenant with me by giving sacrifices. Then let the heavens proclaim his justice, for God himself will be the judge. The psalm begins with a grand and powerful statement. The Lord, the Mighty One, is God, and he has spoken, and he has summoned all humanity from where the sun rises to where it sets. The threefold name of God, the Lord, the Mighty One, is God, immediately establishes his authority and power. In the ancient Near East, kings and rulers would summon the people for important announcements, but here it is God himself summoning all of humanity. This is not a private revelation. God's message is for the entire world. From east to west, all the people are called to attention. Verse 2 goes on to say, From Mount Zion, the perfection of beauty, God shines his glorious radiance. Zion, referring to Jerusalem and the temple, was seen as the earthly dwelling place of God's presence. The psalmist calls it the perfection of beauty, not because of its architecture, but because God's glory radiates from there. This verse echoes the passage from Isaiah chapter 2, verse 3, which proclaims that the law will go out from Zion, the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. Imagine standing at a great royal palace at sunrise, as the golden light reflects off the towers, symbolizing strength, beauty, and authority. That is the image painted here, God's presence radiating from Zion, shouting forth his truth and justice. Do we recognize God's authority over all the earth? He is not just a local or a national God, he is the ruler of all creation. This verse calls us to acknowledge his power, his presence, and his righteous rule. The scene intensifies in verse 3. Our God approaches, and he is not silent. Fire devours everything in his way, and a great storm rages around him. This verse describes a theophany, a visible manifestation of God's presence. The fire and the storm are not random. They are symbols of God's power and holiness, often associated with past appearances. For the Israelites, this imagery would have immediately recalled Mount Sinai, where God revealed himself to Moses. Exodus chapter 19, verse 13 says, Thunder roared and lightning flashed, and the dense cloud came down on the mountain. And then Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 24 tells us, The Lord your God is a consuming fire. God's presence is not tame or passive. He approaches with power, consuming everything in its path. Think of a raging wildfire, unstoppable, consuming everything in its way. God's justice and holiness are like that. They cannot be ignored, and they will burn away all unrighteousness. God is not silent about injustice. He is active, powerful, and present. When we see evil in the world or experience personal struggles, we must remember that God is moving, even when we cannot see the outcome. Verse 4 declares, He calls on the heavens above and the earth below to witness the judgment of his people. In the ancient Israelite culture, legal proceedings required a witness. Here, heaven and earth themselves serve as a divine witness to God's judgment. This follows the pattern set in Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 19, where Moses told Israel, Today I have given you the choice between life and death, between blessing and cursing. Now I call on heaven and earth to witness the choices you make. God's people had entered into a covenant with him, and now he calls them to account. Imagine a courtroom where the entire natural world is watching. A trial so significant that creation itself is called to testify. That's the gravity of this moment. God sees everything, our actions, our faithfulness, and our failures. This verse reminds us that we are accountable before Him, and nothing escapes His notice. In verse 5, God gives this command, "Bring my faithful people to me, those who made a covenant with me by giving sacrifices." Here, God is speaking directly to His covenant people, not to the nations around them. He is addressing Israel, those who entered into a sacred relationship with Him through sacrifices and obedience. However, we will see in later verses, God is not pleased with empty rituals. He desires genuine faithfulness, not just outward acts of religion. Imagine a person giving expensive gifts to a loved one, but their heart is distant and cold. True love is not about gifts alone, but about real committed relationships. That is what God desires, our hearts and not just our rituals. Are we truly faithful to God, or are we going through religious motions? This verse challenges us to examine our hearts. This portion of the psalm closes with this profound declaration, "Then let the heavens proclaim His justice, for God Himself will be the judge." Unlike human judges, where they may be corrupt or limited, God's justice is perfect. His judgment is final, righteous, and true. Think of a perfectly fair judge, one who knows every detail, every intention, and cannot be bribed or influenced. That is God, the ultimate final judge. Are we living with eternity in mind? This verse reminds us that one day we will stand before God's judgment, and only the true and the righteous will remain. Psalm chapter 50, verses 1 through 6 sets the stage for a divine courtroom, where God calls all His people to recognize His authority, holiness, and justice. Thank you for joining me today on our Wisdom Trek. May you live faithfully, trust in God's justice, and seek His presence daily. Until the next time, may God's wisdom guide your steps, and may His peace fill your heart. And if you found this podcast insightful, please subscribe and leave us a review. Then encourage your friends and family to join us and come along with us tomorrow for another day of Wisdom Trek, creating a legacy. Thank you so much for allowing me to be your guide, your mentor, and most importantly, I am your friend as I serve you through the Wisdom Trek podcast and journal. As we take this trek of life together, let us always live abundantly, love unconditionally, listen intentionally, learn continuously, lend to others generously, lead with integrity, and leave a living legacy each day. I am Guthrie Chamberlain, reminding you to keep moving forward, enjoy your journey, and create a great day every day. See you next time for more daily wisdom.